So I think this video should be more aptly named me struggling to draw portraits because I really did, at least at first. Do not let the fact that this is sped up by like 1,000 fool you. The amount of liquify tool I ended up using on all of these to make them look decent is frankly a bit ridiculous. Now, I usually like to have a bigger topic to touch on in my videos, but I think I'll just keep this one more casual today and just chat a bit about some of my thoughts as I work on these portrait comms. Part of me was a bit hesitant to share these because when we share our work with people, you know, we like to pretend we've got it all figured out, but I think this creates this illusion that other people, artists, professionals don't ever struggle in their practice. Not everyone nails the lines and anatomy or whatever on the first go. And I just want to get a bit better at normalizing that and also show that you don't have to let it weigh you down too much when your art doesn't come out the way you want it to. So lately, I've been finding drawing faces, like particularly eyes, really challenging. So I guess in a way, taking on all these portraits was good practice for me. But the reason I find it maybe a little bit embarrassing is because I have been practicing doing art for over a decade. You would think I'd be pretty proficient by now, right? Now, I want to quickly clarify, I actually have no problems drawing realistic heads because that's a direct translation of form and proportion. I think it's more so when it comes to stylized portraits where it starts to get a little bit wonky. I think it's exactly because heads and eyes were something I learned how to draw very young. As I started out, like most people, I relied very heavily on symbols. What I mean by that is like, if you curve a line like this and a line like that, that makes an eye. And when you draw a triangle in this direction, that can make a nose. If you curve the head in a specific way, then you have a cheek and a face. I'm not actually understanding the form and the structure that goes behind the simplification, if that makes sense. I draw it like this because other people draw it like that. And I think even though I've taken the time to study facial structure and the skull in the past, I still tend to revert back to the simplified symbols I've always used. Now, there's nothing wrong with using symbols. I think the issue is that when you start wanting to draw more complex things, like let's say heads and more dramatic angles, well, a lot of those symbols start to fall apart. I ended up doing, I think, 9 or 10 of these portraits total, and the first 3 I did, let's just say I got a little bit humbled. I really had to push through them. I'm not unhappy with the results because I did tweak the hell out of them, but the process was definitely an uphill battle. And I'm a little bit ashamed to say that like for a brief moment, it kind of made me doubt my capacity and kind of skill as an artist. However, I did acknowledge that I was missing information. It's kind of interesting when we can't draw something well. I feel like sometimes we either keep redrawing it over and over again, or I even start pressing down harder on my pencils as if that's going to magically fix the problem. But I forget your drawing capacity has less to do with the physical act of pen on paper and more with your mental thinking. It's why I can probably draw better with my left hand than most with their dominant. It's because I understand form and can translate that into 2D. And as you improve as an artist, you get better at seeing. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're getting really frustrated with a piece, that means that there's something that you don't understand and you need to seek out new resources. And that's why using references is so pivotal in like professional work, because often they can unlock elements that you didn't fully understand. A pose reference can clarify how a form is shaped. A photograph might reveal how light falls on different planes of the face, and so on. And so if you're drawing a person or a character and it's feeling really off, it's most likely either an issue with proportion or your understanding of structure. In this case, a lot of my issues were with like facial structure. I can't draw eyes properly because I don't really understand how they sit on the face in the eye socket, and I have a hard time stylizing them because I don't know if the upper line I draw is supposed to indicate the eyelashes, the eyelid, the eyeliner, or even the eye ducts. The irises and pupils in particular have been driving me crazy because I can never get them focused in the same direction. And I think that's because I'm not really considering the roundness of the eyeball. So yeah, I had to step away for a bit and do some fundamental revisiting. I don't know why I got the impression that like once you learn the fundamentals, you never have to go back to them, but that's so far off reality. It is so helpful to take a step back sometimes and just reevaluate and consider the basics, even if you're a master in your field. Plus, I don't know about you, but I just forget things sometimes. So yeah, I ended up doing like just in my sketchbook turns of a skull, like side to side, up and down, angled. I also used a 3D model to break down the planes of the face. I also looked at some other artists I admire and broke down how they approach eyes. And I know this sounds like a lot, but it was literally just like a few hours of sketching one night, and you'll never believe it, it actually helped so much. I almost immediately saw improvement in my drawing. By the last few portraits, something finally clicked and I just got it. I wish I actually recorded all the portraits I did, but I'm still trying to get into that habit, so I'm sorry I can't show you all of them. But yeah, it was just so easy to fall into the mindset of like, I am so bad, I'm so ashamed, look how other artists do it so effortlessly, why am I struggling so much? But when I started asking like, why is it not working and what can I do about it? I think that's when I started to get unstuck. If you don't know what is not working, that's usually the best time to reach out to more experienced artists. I've fortunately and unfortunately trained my artistic eye really well. I basically spend a lot of time observing things. So I almost always know what's off, but I don't always have the means to fix it easily. It also means I rarely meet my expectations, which can be frustrating. But hey, on the flip side, I guess it makes seeking out resources easier for me. I also wanted to mention that it's helpful to kind of lean into the approaches that work for you. Like there's a lot of different ways to draw a head, for example. And if one way is not working for you, I think it's just a sign to try something else. I've definitely encountered people that are like, you have to do it this way. But I really don't think there's a single approach to art. So it's definitely about finding the specific thing that works for you, obviously. And I guess on a separate note, something I did with these that I haven't explored yet is to kind of think of line art and shading as one thing. You're probably gonna see me like blurring the line art into the shading quite a number of times. Part of that is because line is very much 2D, and to push the form, I wanted to emphasize value shifts more than anything because that indicates volume. And so blurring the line art is just a quick way to integrate that into the painting. But yeah, what else to talk about? I think I realized it's also very helpful to zoom out more and force yourself to use a bigger size brush for the shading. You definitely have to be more intentional with broader strokes before jumping into like detail work. So you end up emphasizing big shapes and forms before getting like really nitpicky. And I think that not only made the final product look better, but it actually sped up my process too, which was helpful. I think I'll kind of wrap it up over here, but yeah, one of my goals for this year is definitely to get better at defining face shapes. Probably gonna involve more plane of the face studies. I've been using this app called Head Model Studio. I've just found it super helpful because you've got actually a number of different models to work with, and it allows you to like change the proportions of the face and the different features. You can also adjust the lighting. But also there's so many free resources online for that as well. And to end this all, I think I might just include a bonus quick breakdown, not supposed to be like a full tutorial or anything, of just how I go about doing some of these portraits. First thing is obviously having your references with you. I did not show all the references I use in this video. I promise I was not doing these from just like my imagination. I just prefer sometimes to have the reference photos on my phone rather than the actual canvas itself, so that's why it's not included in the speed paint. But yeah, references, so important. Having a direct reference is probably going to be a lot easier, but in this case, I was using references from like people's characters and then also a separate photo for the actual kind of like form and structure of the face. Next, I do a really, really rough sketch. This is more meant to just kind of establish the main forms or shapes or flow. I'll usually even like change my brush for this to force myself not to get too detail oriented because I'm just trying to lay it all out. And then I will turn down the opacity, or I'll turn it blue on like the sketch layer and go ahead and do another like sketch over that. And then depending on the complexity of whatever I'm drawing, maybe it'll take me a few tries to get closer to what I want it to look like. Sometimes I'll get it in the first go and just tweak the line art. It just really depends. I don't like to do super clean line art. I just personally don't find that too enjoyable. Like, I have a really hard time using a solid colored line art brush. So if that doesn't work for you, you do not have to force it. I usually just end up like maybe cleaning up my line art and going back in, adding some like dimension and line width. But like, honestly, that works for me. But I do like to take my time with the line art because it's very informative for me when it comes to like form. So before I jump into painting, I do like to kind of have a really established, line art sketch. From there, I'm gonna lay down my flat colors, or in this case, just my gray values. And this part I kind of change depending on what I'm actually painting or doing. I think in this case, I would fill in the entire like line art with just one layer using like lasso tool or just like paint bucket. And from there, add on the different like elements, like a different layer for the hair, a different layer for like the clothes, etc., etc. And once I have those layers, I will start painting on top of them with like a clipped layer. I think using a gradation tool during this process of like shading and lighting is also very useful because rarely are things one note. And when I'm starting off, I just apply midtones, first of all, just kind of getting the, like I said, like the form down. And then once I have my darkest values, I go back in and I add highlights, and still thinking about planes, forms, etc. Personal tip I have for people when it comes to making things look more like volumetric and 3D is bounce light. Like, bounce light has been so helpful for my rendering. And basically what that is just make sure your darkest values are never on the edge. They're always gonna be kind of offset because light bounces off different materials. Once I'm done, I like to combine all my layers onto a different layer, making sure I still have my previous ones in case I need to tweak it in the future. But then once I have it all just like, one page, I'm able to use the liquify tool and kind of make any adjustments that I need and any last kind of rendering details to really finish the painting off. Once that's done, that's done. I know sometimes it's a little bit hard to know when to stop, but I try not to over render my paintings, otherwise I'm gonna just spend all day on them. But yeah, that's just like a quick look into maybe how I approach my portraits. I generally don't like doing tutorials because, like I said, I really change the way I approach my art very often and depending on the project I'm working on. So I don't know if I'm really in a place to be teaching people how to do everything, but hopefully it was helpful for someone else. But yeah. Happy painting and peace out.